Well, I had to bring people in who aligned with my values. So, I was lucky enough to deal with this gentleman over here to my, he's sleeping over there, but. So anyway, I was lucky enough to bring, Phil, you just missed that, buddy.
I heard something. Nothing important.
It's classic, Phil.
YouTube, Francis Mangubat. Here I'm with one of my good buddies, Vince Viney, who is one of the most successful developers here in Philadelphia, building, 125, 150 units right now?
Yeah.
So Vince, do you want to briefly touch on what you do here?
Yeah, so we're a single family and multifamily developer. We build probably about 60 to 70% of our product is single family spec homes that we make available to the public. Whereas the balance of that, 30 to 40% are now as a rental portfolio that we're building to maintain as part of a rental operation that we're starting up.
Awesome. So Vince, a lot of people from the outside, the outside person that does not know you, they're taking a look at, all these trophies and all these awards and all their accolades, and they're saying, wow, holy shit, like Vince is really, really successful. He must have had, some crazy financial backing or, a ton of money behind him from the very start. But I think what people don't know is that you grew up here local to Philadelphia in the very rich neighborhood of Kensington.
The very different neighborhood of Kensington when I grew up there.
Yeah, so do you want to touch on your childhood and sort of how, your upbringing and how that allowed you to overcome adversity and succeed as a developer?
Sure. Yeah, so I grew up in the Harrogate section of Kensington, which is a pocket now that's still very underdeveloped. Hasn't seen the same type of development and growth that some of these other neighborhoods have. I was lucky enough to have a phenomenal mother, a great brother and sister as well. My father passed away at the age of 4, so we grew up in a pretty poverty-stricken area. But what we did have was I had a great mother, great brother, sister, great friends that we essentially kind of raised ourselves. And I'm lucky. I draw back on that to this day. That I was lucky enough to grow up in that Philadelphia neighborhood because that's where I learned all of my core values.
So, take me through. So single mother, you end up going to a St. Joe's University, and take me through your perspective of while in college. Where did you think you'd go with your career? Once you graduated school, what was your outlook on how your life would be as a career?
Sure. That's where I think it's a challenge when you grow up in a neighborhood in an area like that. There really are no role models. As much as I love my mother, I wouldn't call her a business role model, right? She just was a great mother, loved her kids. So quite honestly, I had no vision. I had no role model. So there was points where I wanted to be a UPS driver because it seemed like a great way to make $40,000 a year, and that's all I wanted to become was a UPS driver. It's a great company, but thankfully I took another path. There's points I wanted to be a Philadelphia police officer. Again, any way that you can make a good living and a respectable career, and quite frankly, move out of the neighborhood that we grew up in because there really wasn't a clear line of sight to where the end game was. So I knew school was always going to be the answer though. So that's kind of what brought me down the path of school. But career-wise, truthfully, I just kind of tried different things out and figured it out.
So you had no idea. You majored in business. What was your first job or first career path out of school?
Yes, I was fortunate enough that I was the type of kid. I always worked hard in school. I always valued school. I mean, I was a straight A student. Worked hard at that. Always found that as important. Growing up in the city, we had our fair share of fun, and I made time for that. But I always put work first and foremost in my life. And what I found out over time is that when you work hard, you can play hard, but you got to work hard first. So I knew I wanted to do well in school. I knew I wanted to get a degree. But quite frankly, I had my first child at the age of not even 19, a month before I turned 19, and my plans got sidetracked again because I had to raise a family for a period of time. So I was kind of painfully going to night school, working weekends, full-time job plus full-time at school. Actually, at one point, taking a 15 credit schedule and also working a full-time job. So, but I knew I needed to get a degree to get where I wanted to get in life.
So your 20s or early 30s, what did you do right out of school for work? Like where you
So
work?
right out of school, I got a job at a insurance company, a health insurance company, and I was a claim processor. And it was the first career that I had where, I got dressed up for work every day, felt like I had a purpose. And so from there, I just, I excelled at that job, worked hard, and then I left, like a shame, like what you do in most companies. I worked hard, and then I'm leaving the company and getting a better position at the time with another company called US Healthcare, which was another health insurance company.
So what age was that?
So I would have been at probably around 25 or 26 at that point.
Oh.
So got advancement there. But quite honestly, what I was chasing was a career that earned me a living, that gave me the lifestyle I wanted. I wasn't doing anything I loved. I thought I loved it at the time, but really what I found out that I was loving was making more money. And so I was fortunate enough that as I grew that career path and made more money, I was able to start tapping into other ways of making a living, which is how I got into real estate development.
So 25, 26 is when you sort of stumbled upon your first real estate deal or real estate investing.
Yeah, I probably would have been even a little older than that, maybe 27, 28. And at that point, I had a home. I had moved out of the city and was looking at, hey, potentially maybe I can have a beach house someday. So I said, how could I achieve that? So I thought the only way to get that done is I was lucky enough to meet a good friend of mine who I did my MBA with, and he gave me the confidence to give it a shot and develop a beach home. And that's what I did for our first project. So I bought a 2-unit, bought an existing home, demoed it, built a 2-unit building, sold the bottom, kept the top, and it worked well.
Oh, was that the beach house?
That was our first beach house, yeah.
That you just sold in Ocean City?
No, that was that was our second. We sold that and moved on to another property after that. So our first one was in a different location.
So 27, 28, tell me about the deal, because I feel like that could inspire a lot of people to go take action on their first deal and maybe start real estate investing. So what did that deal look like at 27, 28, and how did that guy pique your interest about real estate? Because when I bought my first house from you in 2016, I'm like, hey Pops, I'm about to go buy this house in Point Breeze. And I says, East Passyunk, that's a horrible neighborhood. And I didn't rely on my dad saying that it was a bad deal. And I understood his background because he got killed in real estate 2005, 2008. But through the skills and the people that I was meeting, I learned that buying the house in Point Breeze was a good deal. So what was that experience like for you?
Yeah, I mean, it is incredibly intimidating because to think about buying an existing home building with the idea of demoing it, you know nothing about demo, and then taking it down to the ground and then bringing in a contractor to build that home. I was lucky enough that I had a friend of mine who had done some smaller scale development outside of the city, and he gave me the confidence, quite honestly, taking my MBA, which really wasn't an essential part. I just made a relationship through taking my MBA. He gave me the confidence to say, hey, you know what? This is something I can take on and do well. So anyway, I bought a tear down home, tore it down, build up, ground up, had to go through negotiate with a general contractor. You learn a lot about what types of features, how much you can spend, what your budget is, what you can really fit out to your comfort level and to your budget. Went through that whole process, and going through that process, I learned a lot about what's important and what's not important in terms of the end construction. So we built that out, and luckily we finished the product, sold off the bottom unit. We then lived in the top, and quite honestly created about $200,000 of equity in the building after that first deal. So that was really just a play to build my first beach home and have a beach home. Well, then your wheels turn again, because you gotta remember, I'm a city kid trying to figure out how.
So you had your place in the city too, right? This is just a second house.
Yeah, at the time I actually was bought a home in Collegeville, so I just moved out of the city. Bought our first home in Collegeville, Pennsylvania, outside the city. So this was a beach home after buying that home in Collegeville. So at that point, of course, the wheels are turning again. That wasn't that difficult, so maybe we can try this again. But this time we sell both of them off. And that's what we did. The next year, we took on another project, a little more experience, had a better idea on how to fit out the house to sell it, to appeal to a spec market, and we were able to do that. And
Is that down in Ocean City?
That was Ocean City, New Jersey, yeah.
So how did you get your start in developing real estate in Philadelphia? So you're probably like 30 years old at the time at the completion of your first project. You see $200K in equity. What was your all-in total development cost there?
Probably would have been somewhere in the neighborhood of around $800,000.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you made on 800. You made 200,000 on 800. So that's
Right.
a pretty decent return.
Yeah, for somebody who's not connected in the industry, had no relationships in the real estate market there. Francis, it was me driving down the street and seeing a cheap home for sale and knowing it looked like something that probably would be torn down because, again, with the relationship I had, I knew what kind of product I was targeting. I was targeting vacant land, which is hard to come by in Ocean City, or a home that looked like it was pretty blighted that would have most likely been torn down. So, you're just making a call, and it's a cold call. You don't have context relationships. You don't know that the information you get from the realtor calling you back, what they think you could sell it for. You don't really even know what you can count on, but you kind of look back on your background and on your experience and knowledge and say, make the right decision.
So let me ask you this: so you're all into this deal for 800. Banks want you to, if you're doing an $800,000 deal, they want you to come out of pocket 200 grand. How did you get $200,000 in your pocket, not coming from money and not having this crazy job? Where did you get the 200 grand?
I actually, the first house I bought in Philadelphia, I bought in cash and was able to make about $60,000 on that project. And then when I went out to Collegeville, I bought at the beginning of the market of a new development and was able to have about $100,000 in equity in that building in about a 1.5-year time frame. So then I basically tapped into the equity of that home. So I was able to pull out equity in my first primary residence to then acquire the down money for the teardown in Ocean City.
It's crazy. I feel like that story kind of relates to me because
Yeah,
that's what
sure.
I got equity in the first house that
Sure.
I ended up buying from you.
Right.
So how does that lead to development in Philadelphia?
Yeah, so this story gets kind of even more interesting from there because then my wheels were really turning in Ocean City. I was probably doing about 5 or 6 buildings a year at that point. My daughter then in 2008, what would I have been? I would have been 35, I guess, 36, 35, 36.
So from 30, you successfully did your first couple flips in Ocean City.
Right.
And at 35, you have this capital, and that's when you
Yeah,
start.
this capital I've accumulated, and my daughter went to the University of Arts in Philadelphia. Gets back to having a child at almost 19. She's now entering college at that point. I'm getting her set up in her sophomore year of college, by the way, in Point Breeze on the 1500 block of Manton Street. Get her all moved in. It was one of those quick, hey, Dad, you need to make a decision. I got to rent with these kids. I need to know now. Well, Dad didn't get a chance to go check out the neighborhood. Show up on Sunday to move her in, and the neighborhood was beautiful home she was living in, but it was a pretty concerning neighborhood at the time.
Right.
If you go back to Point Breeze on the 1500 block of Manton back in 2008,
Oh, wow.
certainly doesn't look like the incredible place that it's become now.
Right.
So after visiting her over that year, of course, I'm seeing incredible transformation going on, by the way, in the city that I grew up in. So I'm thinking, why am I investing all this energy into Ocean City when something great's happening right under my nose in Philadelphia,
Right.
in the town that I grew up in and lived in and was raised in. So my wheels started turning again, and I spent about 6 months driving through the streets, walking through the streets of Philadelphia, learning the market. Because one thing about me is I analyze things pretty heavily before I act. So that's exactly what I did. We analyzed the Philadelphia market. And made my first deal about 6 months after watching the transformation happening in Point Breeze.
Did you get caught at the time? I thought you started developing in Philly 2006, 7?
7, maybe 7. I guess it would have been 7.
So you were at the top of the market.
I was
You
at the
didn't get
very
caught?
top of the market and really started to get heavy in right as the market turned. Yes, that was not the greatest timing, but we managed through it.
The biggest dip that you saw in 2008 was what? I think you told me
Oh,
10,
no, 10,
12%.
yeah. I mean, what was great about Philadelphia was even in the worst time, while other markets like Ocean City were seeing a 20 to 25% reduction in 1 year, Philly saw 30%, but it was over a 3-year period of time. So it was a 10% dip at the most. So it wasn't an unmanageable number. If you were investing with a pro forma
20%.
with an ROI of 20, well, we were shooting for 25 at the time. It's hard to get that now.
Yeah, you can't get that now.
But 25% non-annualized is about 33% when
Right.
you annualize that out. So if the market dips 10 to 12 on a 32% annualized return on investment,
Right.
it's a manageable reduction. That's how we worked our way through it.
You should still be able to double your cash,
Yeah,
I mean, depending on how levered you are.
Yeah.
So, take me through, the first steps of scaling your company. How do you go from, you're doing 1, 2, 3 houses a year to, Philadelphia, you're doing 5, 10. How do you get from 5, 10 to 50 to 125?
So as you grow and you mature and you get more sophisticated, you should be developing more relationships. The people's lives that you're touching, you should have made their lives better in some way. And if you're not, you're probably not maximizing the short time we have on this planet. So I felt like what I did was I started tapping into relationships, all the successful people who I've worked with and gotten to know over the years, and started to share with them some of the experiences I was having. And they were seeing my life change in front of them. So I brought in investors. I mean, one by one, parents of kids I coached, co-workers, family members, one by one, I'm telling my story and sharing that with them and saying, hey, trying to get them involved with it. And that's what I did. I started bringing in a series of private investors. And as I grew that, 5 investors became 10, and within probably like 2010 or 11, I probably was up to about 30 to 40 investors. Now what happens is people whose kids I coached in basketball, they're getting their mother and father involved. So now I'm getting, we're organically growing that through other family members. So now you're not selling it anymore.
It's all going through referral.
Yeah, your constituents are basically selling for you because of the experience that they've had with you. So, but the most transformative time of the company was that when we went from using all private investor money to bringing banks in for construction. We used to not only acquire land with private investor money, we used to build with private investor money.
Why is that?
Well,
you're paying 10-15% on.
Yeah, it doesn't make sense now,
Yeah.
but when you don't have a portfolio, you don't have experience, and you don't have a name, it's not as easy to think to get a bank to lend you a couple $100,000 in a market that was still being considered a retracting market. Think about where we were. We were 2009, 10, 11. Banks weren't handing money out then. So as the confidence grew in Philadelphia, 11, 12, 13, and as my investor portfolio grew and my experience grew, at that point I have a 30, 40 home portfolio to tap into. As my experience, it became easier to approach banks to get more construction funding. So that's when overnight we had already been working with probably $5 to $8 million, somewhere in that neighborhood. We're in that range. Private investor money. We then converted that to acquisition only, and then that's when the company just blew up.
So how did you hire, your construction managers, project managers, and GCs? How do you scale from having, 1 to 30 projects to now you're doing 125? And how do you keep, the integrity of Vince Viney amongst your subs and your GCs? It's a pretty large operation.
So something that we didn't talk about yet was, as we grew the company, my goal all along was, having been a person who built a new construction home in the suburbs, having had a miserable experience, I just felt like it was a game from builders to try to wait people out, try to get them frustrated into just giving up on things that are right. So what I set out to do was make this a better experience. Having a child, getting married, buying a home, they're like the biggest events in our lives, and they should be the happiest events of our lives. And what I found myself personally, and then going to the neighborhood cookouts in the same development, everyone shared the same horror stories, how horrible of an experience it was. And I thought, boy, if you can do this and do it right and do it well, boy, how much of an impact can you have on a market, especially in Philadelphia? I mean, I never thought we could build a brand in a market as vast as Philadelphia. So we were committed to doing it the right way. So back to your question about growing that in the right way, Well, I had to bring people in who align with my values. So, I was lucky enough to deal with this gentleman over here to my, he's sleeping over there, but so anyway, I was lucky enough to bring, Phil, you just missed that, buddy.
I heard something. How do you work?
It's classic, Phil.
I'm guarding the door.
Yeah, thanks, Bill. He's watched my back. There you go. Oh, Bill, I love you, man. As we're growing the company, we're bringing in people who align with our values. I had worked with some guys in Ocean City, Rock Haven builders, good friends of mine, who are still working with us to this day.
He built 3. Rockhaven Builders built 3 of my houses, by the way, that I bought from Vince, and haven't had any issues. So
yeah, so it's
great
been, it's been a great experience.
Yeah.
So we were able to bring people with shared values into Philadelphia who had a lot of experience and grow. So I brought in a series of outside contractors to manage our sites as we grew. What I'm finding is, as we've gotten bigger and bigger, though, the challenges are keeping the same core values. As you get bigger and as you branch out, the talent pool, it drops off. It's harder to find people that are as connected with what we're trying to do. So that's created a shift in our business model, whereas we're going to keep the contractors that have the Rock Havens of the world, who've done a phenomenal job and are committed to high levels of quality and committed to their craft, and also want to make this a better experience for buyers. But what you find is it's harder to find a lot of people, a lot of GCs, general contractors, that share those values. So what we're going to start now doing is hiring our own construction managers, and we already have. We have 3 full-time construction managers. So the V2 Properties brand and reputation and image will be maintained from full-time employees now. And that's a shift we made about 6 months ago.
And one thing that V2 Properties does differently compared to other builders is, can you talk about your warranty team that just executes and lives up to your one of your punch lists? Because I think the risk with buying a home from almost like a no-name builder, and they're going to own the property in a single member LLC. They could be from New York, DC, Boston, and once they disperse all the money, how are you using home? You can't get any of your money back if they don't do the work. So I think the good thing about V2 Properties, you're here to stay. You're here to, you built up Philadelphia, and you're going to keep doing it.
Yeah, I mean, we've probably delivered almost or just over 700 homes at this point in Philadelphia. So we're committed to the market, and you can give a warranty. The warranty is worth nothing if you don't stand behind it. And you're right, we have a committed, dedicated warranty process that is a post-settlement fulfillment process that's consistent. We have documented workflows that we follow, and one thing we never talk about the cost of doing the right thing. If it's we've had major issues, okay, at time to time. Things are out of your control. Things are just sometimes adjacent buildings create field conditions that you can't control, but you have to react to them. So whether it's a big issue or a small, and fortunately we've had a lot more smaller issues than larger, we don't talk about the cost of doing the right thing. We talk about doing the right thing, and that's what we're committed to doing. So our warranty is not a piece of paper. It's the way we live.